So that is the government, our Prime Minister, declaring his War Measures Act, the Desperate Measures Act, and freezing my account and many others. I'm curious, does that scare you, or does that empower you? I can tell for me, it definitely doesn't scare me. We have many ways to go around this. There are a lot of resources. But I'm curious, answer the poll here.
Dear God. And people said that Trump was fascist. Oh, my. I have to say, this whole trucker protest has definitely been illuminating in many cases. You know, and the left in the U.S., the progressives, we'll say, regressives, as I've taken to calling them, you know, Mitwits, the Cathedral, all that good fun stuff. The regressives themselves continue to champion themselves as, you know, the working class. They want to bring about socialism, make life better for everybody on the bottom, etc., etc., etc. And here is an example of, again, what life on the bottom is like. Trucking is not a glorious job. I did it for 2 years as an armored trucker myself. Yes, I consider myself a trucker, and it at least was for a short amount of time, until I had a run-in with the highway patrol, who apparently decided I looked suspicious, even though nothing was wrong with me, and the officer tried to do a very dangerous maneuver that put me, my truck, and the literal thousands of dollars that was in my truck at risk. And the company blamed me and fired me. Well, that's a story for another time. However, you know, again, trucking is not a glorious and glamorous job. It can pay well in the right aspects. I apparently, you know, I wasn't one of those who was well paid, but, you know, again, story for another time. But some people, you know, they make really good money at it. Not enough to they can consider themselves like the rich ivory tower wealthy. Like, you know, they're not going to be millionaires or anything. But it's enough that, you know, in the right places, if they live there, they can be pretty comfortably off. Definitely better than I am at this point. Still though, you know, you're not gonna find like a millionaire trucker. Like, these are the guys who can live comfortably. You know, then they need a paycheck every so often, but they'll do all right. You know, that is what blue-collar working is. That's what, you know, an actual worker is. And the thing about the regressives is that while they talk about being a champion of the minority, the oppressed, the working class, etc., they are out of touch of what that actual working class is. See, when we're talking about the minorities and everybody else out there who, you know, is attending these riots and everything, those aren't actually workers. They don't actually work. Because the real working class, we don't have time for that bullshit. You know, we live paycheck to paycheck. We can't just, you know, sit around all day and, you know, tweet on Facebook. God, look at me. Look at me sound like a boomer. Tweet on Facebook. You know, but that is what it is. And the fact that, you know, it's there was a lot of people who claim that, you know, Trump should have done martial law a number of times during the riots and everything else, and he never did. And there was a lot of call for it, and he would have looked very favorable. He would have been looked favorably on it, at least by his supporters. And he never did, and yet he was considered the supposed most fascist president of our time by some regressives that were on the left. Now, here is Trudeau in Canada actually declaring emergency law. Apparently, he enacted some Emergencies Act, which, has resulted in him doing this. And I'm not going to sit here and really kind of say that this is all true. I'm not in Canada. I don't know what all is going on. I heard that there was a bunch of attempts to seize the attempts of other people, the GoFundMe scandal, another funding company, another backers crowdfunding. Another crowdfunding website is basically getting their attempt to stealing money from that as well. And now, if this is true, and I can't, definitively verify to say whether or not it is true, but if this is true, this is the act of an actual fascist, if you actually want to use that term. This is what fascism looks like. You had people screeching about, how Trump was literally Hitler and the right is fascist and all kinds of stuff like that. And now that we can actually see what it looks like, this is what fascism looks like. These truckers have a legitimate grievance. People want to say that BLM have a legitimate grievance as well. Okay. But that's the difference. The truckers themselves have just simply decided to park themselves and say, we will not be moved. I have yet to hear of any sort of violence or property damage or anything else as a result of this. It's like just a bunch of guys that are just sitting around being a nuisance. And that's fine. That's the right to peacefully protest. You'll only generally find that in first world countries that have that codified into law as permitted. It's definitely encoded in the U.S. law. I mean, that's part of our First Amendment right. But that's the thing now, is that that's literally all these truckers are doing. They're just saying, we will sit here and we will not be moved. And the end result is this. This is the end result of all of that. The government is apparently panicking. They view these truckers as a menace, the same way that old Triple J views Spider-Man as a menace. That's the actual thing here. He's a menace! And that is the real question, is how are these guys actually menacing anybody? They haven't threatened anyone. They haven't caused any property damage. They haven't terrorized their community the same way that BLM has. And see, that's what the difference between an actual protester is and an actual fucking terrorist. This is why I have always said, at least maintained, that the individuals who did all the BLM protesting, those are terrorists. They went around literally terrorizing people in order to get their way. The truckers are not doing any of that. They're sitting by the road. Maybe they're obstructing the roads as well, but, that's kind of an inconvenience, if anything. But they're not hurting anyone. They're not threatening anyone. They're not, making, threats of saying, do things our way or we'll burn down the city, and then actually burning the fucking city down. And you've got Trudeau and everybody else in the Canadian government treating these people as terrorists. They're literally wielding the power of the state against these people. I've heard that, the Mounties and the police have come out, tried to get these truckers moved. They tried to have it tow moved, and a lot of the towing companies have just opted out and saying, we can't do it, bro. We can't do it, bro. We can't get out there and do what you need us to do. Some companies have opted, to support them. Others have just said, we don't have the people or resources to do it. And other people of them have said, we'll be in the area to, service people who are actually stranded and do our jobs and fulfill our other contracts, but we can't help you. We can't help you, buddy. Can't help you, buddy. And this is the same country that's like had those videos mocking its flag as just a leaf. Your flag is a leaf. Honestly, I'm surprised this hasn't happened in the U.S. sooner. I don't understand why. Maybe it's just because the U.S. is bigger, and it's kind of have a I am, as an American, I will freely admit, that I am a little ashamed that, the Canadians beat us to this. Probably going to get mocked a whole bunch by the Canadians when they say it's like, oh yeah, we fought for freedom first. And, I'm a red, white, and blue American. But in all seriousness, if anybody on the regressive side wants to claim that Trump is literally Hitler and is a fascist and thank God Biden's in office because look at how free we are now under Biden and all that, look north. You've got Biden literally advocating for Trudeau to roll out the military to clear out this peaceful protest. Whereas there was actual militant riots that did property damage and terrorized its citizens. And the most that Trump did was deploy federal agents to protect federal property. It's like he was giving the locals the chance to clean up their own mess. Now, granted, if he had actually stepped in to actually do something about these riots, he probably would be a little bit more seen as a little bit more favorable. But the fact that he never did what Trudeau does here and declared martial law kind of puts the shoe on the other foot now, doesn't it? Because now here you've got a supposed progressive, liberal, freedom-minded leader who dresses up as a minority in some cases to prove how progressive and tolerant and all loving he is, enacting emergency powers that I admit, I would believe to be more to deal with an actual crisis. Because here's the thing, is that, the truckers have at this point, they've won. They've gotten the Canadian government to show how totalitarian it actually is. The fact that they've already played their hand and shown that when the chips are down, now is the time for them to not negotiate with terrorists, and I use that term loosely because that's apparently how they want to use it. I really shouldn't be compromising on that, but at least for the purposes of this video. Now that the time is apparently shown for them that they will not negotiate with supposed terrorists, and they've labeled the truckers and anybody who supports them, that they can now free to wield the state's power against them. Like, what menace are these truckers supposedly doing? Because at this point, the government has lost. If they continue to showcase heavy-handedness towards these peaceful protesters, and this is what an actual peaceful protest looks like, you schmucks, they've already shown themselves to be actual fascists. Like, this is what fascism in this day and age looks like. Welcome to fascism, people. Y'all were calling, the right Nazis and Hitler and everybody else, and now that you're in power, it's like, oh, everything's peaceful and good, and now they're losing control. Because if they come to the negotiating table now, they've lost. They've said, we don't want to negotiate. And now they've shown that they're willing to leverage power against, actual protesters. They've effectively lost at this point. If they had come to the table earlier, it might have been seen as a win for the truckers, and maybe they wouldn't have gotten everything they wanted. But now it's kind of too late. So long as the truckers continue to stand their ground, they've won. That's pretty much it. They've effectively won at this point. And I don't think that the regressives are going to recognize that. They will continue to see themselves as champions of the downtrodden, of the oppressed, and let's be honest, life for them has really not gotten any better. I don't see, at least, here in the U.S., I don't see any UBI getting onto the table anytime soon. The Build Back Better plan keeps getting knocked off the table, though they're trying to institute it piecemeal through different pieces of other legislature there. But, the last time they tried to put it on the table wholesale, it didn't really work out for them, as even some of the Democrats kind of cocked their eyebrow at it. And, I remember last time I took a look at it there, at least through the video that Tom put out, and it kind of quirked my eyebrow at it as well. It's a new summer home for your palace foreman is not infrastructure. I will continue. This is the big problem again I have with the regressives. The continuous redefining of things to try and get things pushed through. When you can't communicate any further, that's kind of where you're having the breakdown there. But I wanted to kind of showcase this here and get the message out there that if this is really true, if this is what's happening on the ground, if this is what's going on out there, then, this is what we actually have to look forward to under these supposed progressive leaders who are supposedly the most popular leaders of our time. That's just me. Or, again, I may just be screaming into the void about all this.